there's a lot of kink shaming in our society. Let's just put it bluntly. There's kink shaming, there's bottom shaming, there is broke shaming, there's ugly shaming, there's fat shaming. There's all sorts of shaming within our society that we've all seen or even, kind of bit endured, right? So kink is just one of those things.
What's up, everybody? You've tuned in to Just Drawz, the podcast that explores hot topics and various experiences among same-gender loving Black men. In each episode, we offer raw, vulnerable, and stripped-down perspectives to give voice to our frequently overlooked population. Here, we don't just scratch the surface, we dive deep, peeling back the layers of our experiences as well as heteronormative stereotypes. Let's get into this week's episode.
What's up, family? Welcome to the Just Drawz podcast, where we keep it vulnerable,
Raw, stripped down,
and authentically just
us.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm your boy, Darius, aka DMC.
So grab a drink.
Or keep your hands on the wheel.
Readjust your support.
And let's get into it.
All right. So tonight we're coming from the lobby of the W Hotel in Atlanta.
Okay. I've been there. So this is finally a place where I know where the hell we are. So thanks for setting us up here. Excellent. Good job.
All right. So tonight, this episode, Darius, what are we talking about? What are we doing here tonight?
All right, so we're in for a treat, listeners. Our guest on this episode knows that what's underneath really matters, whether it's your underwear or your emotional well-being. He's a skilled sex therapist who helps people navigate intimacy, pleasure, and connection with confidence. So whether you're feeling freaky, supportive, or in need of just a little extra coverage, he's got the insights to keep you comfortable. So please welcome Machel Hunt to the show.
Welcome.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here.
Glad to
Guys,
have you.
it's like you always give a little razzle dazzle at the beginning. I like that.
You know, a little something.
Just a little something.
Got to give it to him, you know.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to join the conversation and, see what you boys are up to.
Awesome. Thank you again for heeding the call. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Oh, where do I start? So I am a psychologist. I specialize in sex and relationships. So I do sex therapy, relationship counseling, psychosexual coaching, sex coaching, training, development, mental health consultancy, training, in business organizations, sort of like corporate training. I also do, sort of like tantric training as well for people who want to get more intimate, more hands-on, more focused.
Oh, wow.
Now, I've been doing this for 23 years. So, lots of different experiences across different, sort of like industry, different fields, and certainly across different continents. So,
okay. Awesome. Yeah, some of that stuff I didn't know. I've known you for a little while. And I was like, okay. Yeah, I was like, tantric. Okay.
That's the really fun stuff.
Oh yeah. I can see how that would be. Yeah. So let's kind of
before we get started. I know
Jeff.
there's going to be something that people are going to ask. They're going to ask, "Where are you from?" So you don't have to be detailed.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
you don't have to be super detailed. Just as much information as you want to provide.
I won't tell you the street. How about that? But I'm originally from London, England, the UK, and I've been in the States for 13 years now.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Thanks.
For some reason, I did think it was longer than that.
But it's not. It's actually going to be 13 years this year.
Okay.
So yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Cool.
Awesome. So let's kind of get into some questions here. This is going to be an episode where, we're getting some good information here. So whenever we have like these professionals here, we want to make sure that you all get the information that you need. So we've curated some questions here. Yeah. We're going to have some conversation as well and, some laughs because you know how we do. So one of the questions that I kind of want to ask, let's get into the health side of things first. So what are some of the common misconceptions about sex health within our community, and really, how can they be addressed?
Ooh, there's quite a lot of misconceptions that are more common than not.
Hmm.
And one of those misconceptions is that, if you're one of the biggest ones is that if you're sort of like, you know, able to somehow become undetectable, that there is no chance that you can transmit HIV. That's
Mm.
actually a misconception. There
Hmm.
is still a very small chance that you can transmit it. It's not big, so most people don't want to talk about it, but the reality is there is a small possibility, depending on what circumstances it's in, that you may transmit. So that's a big misconception I hear all the time.
Hmm.
Another big misconception is that size matters. And to some extent it does, but sometimes it really doesn't. It's all about how you navigate what the sizes that you have or the sizes that you're using, that
Hmm.
you're with. So that's another misconception. Another misconception is that mental health is not as important as physical health,
Hmm.
or
Mm.
sort of like medical health. And I think that's a huge misconception that, I always try to debunk as much as I can in every conversation I have. Those are the three biggest ones that I think are really more common than not.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Because I know, the UU campaign,
Yeah,
undetectable, untransmissible, is really big because, we don't want to stigmatize people that
yeah,
are HIV positive, of course. But
absolutely.
yeah, there is a very small chance that people can contract HIV, just like there's a small chance of people that are on PrEP can still possibly contract it as well. So there's
Absolutely.
still some risk. Nothing is zero,
Right.
but
Nothing's
Right.
100% safe.
right,
Hmm.
Absolutely.
right. So we have to
And
just to be sure that we have to put that out there. But I
Hmm.
think the thing is that people feel like it's an acceptable risk factor for them to engage because it is so low.
absolutely. And I think everything that we do carries some level of risk, right? So I think
Hmm.
as long as we're educated enough to know what those risks are, and then we can decide with amongst ourselves whether the risk outweigh the benefits,
Yeah,
right? Or whether the
Hmm.
benefits outweigh the risk.
yeah,
And I think that's a conversation that most people sort of like will have, but not enough. So I think the podcasts like these or outlets like these where we're actually having meaningful conversations, I think is great for those people who don't necessarily have these conversations enough. And you're right about the stigma. I think there's stigma within our communities that have actually made it very difficult for people to be open and honest and transparent and, have fun the way they want to beyond just HIV. I think HIV is one of the biggest stigmas, but there's so many stigmas, and I'm sure we'll get into it as we continue our conversation today. But I definitely think that stigmas are a huge part of why we don't actually have the best lives that we can.
Hmm.
So I
yeah.
definitely want to, thank you for saying that as well.
You talked a little bit about, or you talked around this a little bit, and this idea of debunking stigmas. And one of the ways that we can definitely debunk stigmas is, again, through having conversations and having healthy communication. So within like sexual partners, how can gay men specifically maintain healthy communication with their partners about like their sexual preferences, boundaries, or even like their desires?
Yeah, that's a big one. Healthy communication starts with honesty.
Hmm.
And I think when we're not honest with ourselves, it makes it very difficult for us to be honest with others.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And if it's difficult for us to be honest, then it's challenging to have healthy communication. We skirt around things. We say things that we think are going to sound good to the other person because that's what we would, sounds good to us. So I think in order for us to have and maintain healthy communication within our relationships, it starts with us being honest with ourselves. Sometimes it's very difficult for us to say what our actual desires are because we don't want to hurt someone else's feelings.
Yep.
We don't want them to judge us. We don't want them to stigmatize us, for example. We don't want to be seen as something other than what we are. So again, I think just being honest with ourselves is the beginning of having healthy communication. And then once you're able to do that, you have to navigate what healthy feels like for the other person as well. Because your version of communication may be very different from the other person's version of communication. What you think is good communication may be subpar to someone else's level of communication. So getting on the same page is going to help you to navigate what healthy communication looks and feels like in a relationship. So first of all, being honest is number one. Secondly, is about knowing what you want and being able to identify what the other person wants and needs. And then thirdly is to be very clear about your needs. There's 3 points of communication I always talk to people about. One is being concise. The other one is being consistent. And the other one is being clear. If those 3 C's are involved, then you're more likely to have healthy communication with the person that you're trying to communicate with. And it's so important when you mention desires. I see people all the time that have desires that are unmet or kind of denied to themselves because they
Mm-hmm.
feel that if they share those desires with the people they love, care about, or having sex with, then they're going to be seen as different.
Hmm.
So thinking about what our desires are, normalizing those desires, and then sharing that with the people we love, I think is also going to be a benefit for healthy communication.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. We did an episode about kinks
Mm,
last season, and one of the questions was about when would be a good time for someone to disclose, "Hey, I'm into this thing."
right.
And I think it's important that people feel like I think if someone doesn't feel comfortable with sharing that information, that's where we kind of get into that realm where people start to creep and seek out those desires and act on those desires from someone else outside of that they don't feel that will judge them, and they won't actually engage their partner
Mm,
into their kink or whatever because they don't want to feel ashamed and they don't want to disappoint that person because
yeah.
for so long they felt like, oh, I can't really do this, I feel like I shouldn't enjoy this thing, where it's pretty a normal thing or something that other people do as well. It's just that they haven't gotten over that hump where they felt
Yeah.
comfortable enough to disclose and feel like they may disappoint their partner.
There's a lot of kink shaming in our society. Let's just put it bluntly. There's kink shaming, there's bottom shaming, there's broke shaming, there's ugly shaming, there's fat shaming. There's all sorts of shaming within our society that we've all seen or even, kind of bit endured, right? So kink is just one of those things. And I think, having a kink or having a fetish that is not, sort of like fashionable in the moment. I think a foot fetish is very fashionable, right? No one's going to really be shameful about having a foot fetish. I see people say it all the time. I have a foot fetish, but something else that maybe isn't so fashionable is sort of like cruising, right?
Mm,
It's not very often that you'll have a conversation with someone. They'll say out loud, "Oh yeah, I cruise in the park at night."
yeah.
Or I cruise on the
Hmm.
toilets or anything like that. So I think, having fetishes that doesn't feel like it's normalized is
Hmm.
definitely going to bring some element of shame and guilt to it. And you're right. I think if you're not really able to accept that as who you are, then you're not really going to be able to share that with someone else, and you're going to do it in secrecy, right? You're going to
Hmm.
do it in privacy. I work with a lot of men who have sexual compulsive disorders, and one of the elements of sexual compulsive disorder is that you do it in secrecy, right? So you do it when your partner is sleeping, you do it when you're out of town, you do it when you're supposed to be at work, but you have an alibi because you're supposed to be at work, so you can, and that is shrouded in shame. So I think having more open conversations, being honest with ourselves, being honest with our immediate groups, So if you have a kink, for example, and you tell, Darius, and Darius like, oh yeah, me too, then that gives you a little bit more empowerment to say, actually, you know what, I have friends who are like this. We all talk about it, so I'm not going to feel so bad about
Mm.
sharing that with my new partner. And that might leave the door open for your partner to share with you what their kinks and fetishes are. What their desires are. It may not be a kink or fetish, maybe something that they just want to try and they're unsure about how you're gonna like it.
Yeah.
So I think just empowering ourselves, to be able to share what our true desires are is going to be helpful as well.
I feel like that's really interesting, though, that Jeff brought that up. That if you're in some sort of relationship or you're in an agreement with someone, it
Mm,
may not necessarily be at the relationship stage, but that you don't feel comfortable enough having those sorts of conversations with the person that you've made an agreement with, but you're comfortable enough to go outside of that to have those
mm,
desires or those needs met. It's really wild to me how that those levels of communication work. I mean, I teach communications, and so I'm just like, well, again, same C's that you have,
mm.
uh, being concise, being clear, and being what was the third one you said?
Consistent.
Consistent. Yeah, so having that or knowing that those are the things that you need to kind of have, like I just don't understand how. Sometimes I don't understand that, like
Yeah.
how it's
Mm.
easier to go outside of that instead of saying, "Hey, I'm with you right now, and this is what it
Yeah.
is."
I think it's easier to be something with someone else when you have no expectations with that person,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So you're talking about having an agreement, whatever that agreement is. We're
Right,
dating
right. Hmm.
exclusively, we're in a relationship, blah 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 blah.
Right.
There are expectations that comes within that role, right?
Hmm.
Whatever the role is, whatever title you've given each other, there are
Hmm.
expectations that come with that. With those expectations, that leads to disappointments, right? It leads to consequences, maybe. So then there becomes a barrier for honest communication in that relationship or in that space. While if you go out to someone who you don't have an agreement with, there is no expectations. There is no shame around being disappointed by that person or being a disappointment to that person. So that's why it's easier for people to do things that they really enjoy with people who they don't have a commitment or an agreement with.
Yeah. I totally can see that.
Yeah,
Totally.
I can see it. It's just, yeah, it just it blows my mind sometimes because I have issues a lot of times with people that I engage with on communication, or with
Yeah.
communication. And it's just like, okay, listen, like I'm going to put out here, I'm going to add a fourth C to that. I'm going to be confrontational in that, and I'm going to put out there, okay, this is kind of the expectation, or these are the things that I can do. What are your expectations of me, and how are we going to progress through this, and or where are we at this phase? And there are people who shy away from that so easily, and it's like, okay, well, cool, then that is what it is. But you want all of these things, like you want this relationship, you
Mhm.
want to have this person, you want, we got holidays coming up, that, and this is cuffing season, so
Right.
I want to cuff,
Valentine's is just around the
yeah, yeah,
corner.
we got Valentine's, we got, I just want to cuff, before the summer rolls around, and then I get out
Mhm.
here and it's hot boy, hot girl, hot
Everything
whatever, hot
summer.
everything summer, right? Hot
Hot
private part summer.
non-binary.
Hot
Right.
non-binary, hot, yeah. Hot gender non-conforming summer,
Right.
so you want to have all of those things, but it's just like, I don't I want those things, but I don't want to put in the work to communicate to the
Mhm.
person that I am interested in, or want to be interested in, or hope that is interested in me, kind of thing. It's just it's wild to me.
I think.
The thing is, people want they want the benefits without putting in the effort, right?
Hmm.
And the effort is basically you saying, "These are my expectations. Can you meet them?"
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I think when it comes to any sort of relationship, whether it's dating exclusively, we're a couple, we're a throuple, we're poly, whatever it is, there are expectations in that, but we don't like to talk about what our expectations are because
Mm-hmm.
we're afraid to scare people away.
Okay.
I think it's very, very important that we're boundaried.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
part of that
Right.
is about having expectations. So when I hear people say, "Oh, I don't have any expectations. I don't want to put any expectations on that."
Mm-hmm.
We all have an expectation.
All right.
Yeah.
Whether we want to admit that to ourselves or not,
And the
we
fact that
all
you said
have.
you don't have an expectation is an expectation. Like
Right.
there's no, these
Well,
are no expectations, and you're like, okay, well then that's the expectation that there are none. So,
I think even within that context, there are still expectations,
yeah,
right?
true, true.
Everyone expects to be respected.
All
Mm-hmm.
right.
Why not say it?
Yeah.
Right? Everyone expects honesty,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're expecting honesty, then what comes with that is you also have to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the expectations that we have of people, whether they're said or unspoken, we have to be honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
So we also know that with those expectations, there's a possibility of disappointment
Yeah. And accountability,
and
because
accountability.
Mm-hmm.
because you know, I feel like people get stuck on the not wanting to disappoint someone part. And they, again, it kind of goes back to what I feel earlier was the shaming. People feel shamed because they like XYZ, and they feel shamed because they like, ABC. It's all comes back to that, and people don't feel that they're comfortable. And I get setting expectations with any relationship, but I think people think, oh, I have to put all of these expectations out on day one, and they don't have to do that because it's a
Mhm.
continued conversation
Right.
over
Right.
time.
Yeah. And over time, your expectations might change.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Your needs might change.
exactly.
The dynamic of the relationship will change. And then you have to reassess that. Is this still a reasonable expectation to have?
Mm-hmm.
You know, or am I going to continue having the expectations I had on day one 10 years in?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to evolve as we grow and things change. You may be this vanilla type boy when you meet your boyfriend in the club, but then over time you grow up, you start traveling, you start meeting new people, you realize actually there's some other things that may not be so vanilla about me.
Yeah.
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 I might like a little brown chocolate from time to time. I might like a little strawberry,
Okay. Yeah. I was like,
and
yeah.
then
Let's not say brown chocolate. But yeah.
double.
little little caramel,
I
Okay.
mean, I
There we go.
like
That that might
Rocky
that might
Road,
be
brown and
better.
dark chocolate.
Might I don't know about Rocky Road either.
little
Um.
birthday cake.
Yeah.
Right.
Sprinkles and
But,
all.
but but
Maybe.
we have
Yeah.
to continue to check in with each other, right? And
Mm-hmm.
say, is this still working for us in the way it was before?
Hmm.
And not just think that because it's always been that way, it's going to continue to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
We have to evolve. So I think that's also part of communication as well.
Because I was gonna say I tend to be a little bit more vanilla when it comes to stuff. Now it's a very delicious vanilla, but
Are you
but
vanilla all day, every day, all the time, or do you have some spikes where you go outside of that box?
so I don't know that I've had the opportunity
Mm,
to test that because there tends to be a revolving door, and it's like, okay, I'm going
right.
to go into this vanilla, I'm not going to go into this with a flavor yet.
Mm,
Let's see where this are, and then we can do mix-ins, we can do add-ins like they do at Cold Stone Creamery,
right.
but we're going to
Mixed
start with
in.
a base. We're going to start with a base. Yeah, the vanilla is the base. Now again, it's a
Right.
very delicious vanilla, very delicious vanilla, but
Stacy.
yeah, it's yes, it's delicious. But again, we'll talk about mix-ins. But
Right.
so and like I said, it's I haven't had the opportunity to be able to kind of explore that with somebody that I trust enough
Right.
to say,
Right.
okay,
Hmm.
we've had those conversations, we've got clarity, we've got cohesion, we've got the communication, we've got all of that down, and so now I'm like, okay, oh, you're interested in this. Okay, let's give it a shot
Yeah.
because I trust you, and we've got some sort of emotional connection here,
Yeah.
far beyond just the sexual piece of it.
Yeah. I think that's important point too, right? Because if you're mentioning that you have this revolving door, then when do you actually elevate? When do you go
Right.
to the next
Right.
level if you're
Right.
constantly revolving?
Right.
And
Right.
I find that a lot in our community, right, among
Mm-hmm.
Black gay men, is that
Mm-hmm.
so many of us are on those revolvers
Mm-hmm.
that we get to 40, 50, even 60, and we still have never elevated
Mm-hmm.
to anything beyond that, because that just is the revolver that we've been on for the last 20, 30 years. So I think it's really important when we talk about healthy relationships and having a healthy sex life, that you think about how that can gradually grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you evolving? Is
Mm-hmm.
this the same relationship you had 10 years ago,
Right.
just
Right.
with a different person?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there a way that you've learned and grown and evolved into something different?
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think I see that enough within our culture.
Yeah, I agree. What about spontaneity?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, in sex and maintaining safe sex practices, but still being spontaneous and having a level of intimacy.
Yeah. Well, I think spontaneity is a spice of life. You know, I
So
love it.
cliche.
Yeah, I know. But so good.
Okay.
A good vanilla. Vanilla is a spice. It's a flavor.
I mean,
So it's
so delicious. It's
Listen,
delicious
vanilla
over
is
here. It's delicious
when
over
it, when
here.
it when it comes to sex, vanilla
Hmm.
is the most basic spice.
Hmm. But it's delicious though.
But we wanna elevate beyond that. So let's add some spontaneity to our spice collection.
Hmm.
But I think I think spontaneity is great. I think it's fantastic. I think we all need it. Um, I think in terms of adding spontaneity with safer sex practices, that can be very challenging
Hmm.
sometimes, right? Especially if you think about spontaneity in a way that involves other people outside of your normal,
Hmm.
like regular routine, knowing partners, then it does add another layer of, well, can I be safe with this person? And
Hmm.
we all know that there's so many drugs available now, so many different medicines that can help us to stay safe
Hmm.
medically.
Right.
But then there's also an element of emotional safety, right?
Hmm.
Which nobody talks about. I mean, I'm always harping on about it, but I'm usually the only one at the top of the fence shouting, be safe emotionally. you
Hmm.
know? So that also adds, it's another layer of safety within being spontaneous that limits how unsafe you could be emotionally, right?
Hmm.
And when I think about emotional safety, I think about boundaries. I think about honesty. I think about trust. I think about being able to share, a healthy space with someone that you're being intimate with. And those things are things that you can only get if you have conversations. So, say, for example, if you're just interested in having a pleasure that is spontaneous. That may be going to a glory hole, for example. You know,
Mm.
not seeing the person, not having any conversations. You may be the one sucking, you may be the one getting sucked. That's 5 minutes, you ejaculate, and then you're out. Or you may stay for some other flavors. But those kind
Yeah. Let's
but
yeah, let's just call it that. Yeah.
right,
Flavors.
Hmm.
right, exactly. But in those spaces, because the goal is just to have a pleasure experience that may be spontaneous, it may not be something you do all the time, then there is really a very, very limited space for you to be emotionally safe in that environment, right? So some environments it's almost virtually impossible for you to maintain emotional safety, but I think it's a great way to think about how you're spontaneous. Is this a space where I can feel safe, still enjoy the fun that I want to have, and still come back to a place that feels normal after that? Sometimes people can be spontaneous and they get trapped in to a space that creates more anxiety for them than before,
Hmm.
right?
And I was going to say, are there instances where people get trapped into this space of spontaneity that they don't know how to get out of? That there's a
Yeah.
constant revolving door of spontaneity. And so it's almost like you're looking for the next high.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is part of what sexual compulsivity is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can try to be spontaneous, but then if there are pre-existing conditions or any sort of like underlying factors that creates a base that harbors compulsivity, then that's problematic. And that's why I mean about being emotionally safe, right? You have to know, are there any sort of like pre-existing conditions? Do you suffer with anxiety? Do you have issues around mental illnesses or mental health? Are you emotionally secure person? Are you someone who attaches? Do you have an addictive personality? All of those things will feed into how emotionally safe you are, because if not, then it could go down that road you mentioned where it leads to compulsivity.
Mm.
And we know that there's a lot of sexual compulsivity in our communities. We see them all the time. People say, "Oh, he has a high sex drive. Oh, he's sexually liberated. Oh, he's just having a good time. He's young. Let him do it." But underneath all of that, there are so many undiagnosed sexual compulsive disorders that nobody really wants to talk about because it's covered in this facade of pleasure.
Mm.
Gotcha.
Because it seems like people are trying to escape something when
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
are engaging in sex that often. And nothing wrong with having sex, nothing wrong with having a lot of sex. But I think, as we mentioned before, we've all had hoe phases. And
Have
sometimes
we?
I would assume,
I mean,
I'm gonna let you speak for
let's,
yourself on that one.
well,
I,
us
I
as,
can't I can't say that I'm out of mine yet. I'd love
Right.
to. I'd love to say that,
So
but
some people are having whole phases, some people are in their whole phase as
hmm,
we speak.
yeah,
And
mine
we're
is mine has
including
been for a
everyone in
while.
this space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I've been in mine for a while, and I'd love to be able to come out of it.
And there's some people who haven't gotten to their whole phase yet.
right. And so my question is basically, or was my statement is basically saying that, some people kind of get stuck there and they
Mm,
don't ever
Mm-hmm.
leave,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
and it's not because they want to get out. They want to be there. It's not that, oh, I'm just doing this because I'm waiting on Mr. Right or Mr. Left to come. And the only people that are coming are Mr. Left, Mr. Right, Mr. East, Mr. West, Mr. Up,
Mr.
Mr. Down,
Upside
all
Down.
of them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not like Darius who says, I want to get out of it. I can't wait to leave this
No, no,
phase.
Yeah,
no, no, no.
I'd love to get out of it,
Right.
but you know, it's that communication. It's the
Yeah.
communication piece, and it's
Yeah.
the, when you're trying to evolve, like you used earlier, you're trying to evolve and you're trying to say, okay, hey, I'm I'm more than this, and I want to see you as more than just that. Now, this is great. This is awesome for what we're doing for right now, but I want to be able to see you in a different light. I want to be able to see you as somebody that I don't just think about when I'm horny,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of people, not a lot. Let me stop using hyperbole here, but I have a decent amount of people who really kind of view me like that. Like it's
Wow.
they're thinking
Yeah.
about me when it's sexual,
Convenient for them.
yeah, when it's convenient and when things are sexual, like I'll get hit up when somebody's like horny and I'm like, okay, like yeah, I'm not like I'm reading right now or I'm cleaning up or something like that. But those are like sometimes those are the only times that I hear from people. And I'm going, okay, I want to see you as more than just
Mm.
somebody that I think about when I need to release.
Mm,
And
But
so
they
it's,
only see you as the way, as a release.
I'm not going to say that they only see that because I don't want to speak for those people, but that's what it
Mm.
seems like on the outside looking in or
Right.
being on the receiving end of it. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the idea of a hoe phase is something that I think everyone has some experience with,
Right,
right?
right.
Some people don't want to be considered a whore. Some people don't want to be called a slut. Some people, have different ways of identifying what they do sexually. But I think
They
in
just go with the
general,
flow. Yeah, like
right,
stuff like
we
that.
just we know what a hoe phase is,
Right,
as
exactly.
grown-ups
Hmm.
who live in the Western world. But I do think that there are some people who for their decision making for their lives, they don't want to have a committed relationship.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be with one person,
Mm-hmm.
or a steady partner.
Right.
They want to engage in having multiple sexual relationships with multiple sexual partners multiple times as they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be meeting that person, but I think it's important that when you meet that person, that you're able to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I want. It doesn't mean I'm going to be in this phase forever, but right now, this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
So we eliminate any expectations that they're going to see you differently.
I've
Like
had a few instances like that where people have
yeah,
said that, and I've even said that at certain points. When I was in my 30s, I was like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, I'm not necessarily looking for that. I'm not looking for anything like right now. So I'm just having a good time. I'm sowing my royal oats,
yeah.
kind of thing. But that changed, and I was like, okay, yeah. So now I'm kind of looking for something that's a little more stable and a
Mhm.
little bit more consistent.
Yeah. And it
It
gets more meaningful as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It could be something that is consistently friends with benefits, maybe, but
Mhm.
ultimately that's not what I want. So
Would you have a friend with benefit who had other partners, maybe say he was married to someone else and you're his bit on the side?
I've been there.
Yeah. So
So
is that something you want again?
no, not particularly. I mean, if it happens and the chemistry is there, like as a placeholder for what I'm
Mhm.
actually looking for, and I know that's absolutely not ideal, but sometimes I think in that vein. But ultimately, like right now, I'm like, nah, I think this is what I really want. Like I want something
Yeah.
that is a little bit more substantial.
Yeah, I think it can be a bit problematic if we start considering ourselves being placeholders,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there is some value
Mm-hmm.
that is stripped away from us when we begin to be okay with being someone's placeholder or
Mm-hmm.
someone else
Mm-hmm.
being our placeholder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, and again, I feel like we go through as black gay men, we go through some of those nuances of, am I okay? Is this okay for now? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is this just like a stepping stone to get to the other side? Am I hoping to get something else? Do I want something else?
Right.
And we
Right.
question ourselves, we internalize all of our decision making around, is this something that's good for us? But I
Mm-hmm.
think value systems are really great. And I find that
Mm-hmm.
most people make better decisions when they hold a high value of themselves.
Right, right, right. I
Decision
agree with that.
making becomes much poorer when there's low values, low
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem that we
Mm-hmm.
have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what I do mostly with my work, is about making sure that we understand how we hold ourselves accountable, and what values we place on our decision making.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So I'm going to bring it back a little bit to something we talked about earlier with kinks and HIV.
Prejudice.
Yes. So, okay. So there is a growing or more visibly displayed group of people online that are into the bait scene. And we kind of saw this in the early 80s when HIV and AIDS was a big deal and people weren't having sex, and they was like, oh, well, let's just do this. Let's hook up. We'll jack
Mhm.
off. It'll be cool. It'll be fun. And this seems like it's a healthy option for people. Do you see this becoming more normalized? Because I know during the pandemic, there was a resurgence of this as well, just because
Yeah.
people were trying to get not necessarily be in the same room with people. So people were using a lot of Zoom and Google Meet
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
stuff like that, type of hangouts to still have some sexual gratification, but virtually.
Yeah. I remember one of those times there was like 500 people on a video call. Everyone just going at it. That
Were
was
you
that
were you
was
on that call?
I wasn't on it, but I saw a
Oh,
video
okay.
clips of
Oh,
it.
okay then. Okay.
Yeah. So I saw video clips and I was like, wow, this is the whole movement.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I noticed is that back in the early 80s, when HIV first like became an epidemic,
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
people were doing it for safety reasons, right? they wanted to remain safe. So they formulated like baiting as a way of still enjoying sexual pleasures, but also avoiding being, you know,
Hmm.
being affected or infected by HIV. Now, I think people are doing it for a whole different reason. It's no longer a safety issue. This is also, it's almost like a subculture within our sexual dynamic where people, they could have sex but they
Hmm.
choose not to, you know, not for safety reason but just for the mere fact of it being a kink. You know, it's like we don't, and for some people as well, it's avoiding any kind of intimate connection with people. You know, it's like I can bait with 20 guys
Hmm.
but I don't want to fuck 20 guys, right? That's too much. It's too much on my psyche. It's too much on my body. It's too much on my organs. But baiting, it's
Hmm.
easy, it's fun, it's pleasurable. I get to see 20 dicks, and you know we can
Hmm.
all have a good time.
And
So I,
asses.
And
and
asses,
well,
yeah.
yeah, if you're turning around a little bit,
And
you know,
taints.
um, so
Gooch.
I see it. Yes, I do see it being a lot more sort of like accepted within our communities, um, but not for the same reason as it was back in the 80s and 90s. So I do think it's a part of our culture that a lot of people have embraced. You know, there's still some people who have some stigma around it.
Hmm.
I know couples who consider that cheating.
Yeah.
So, and then there's some people who don't consider it cheating. There's like, I'm
Hmm.
not touching anyone, I'm just touching myself. So that comes with its own challenges if you're in a relationship, right? But I think it's more acceptable now than it was, say, 10 years ago or even 15 years ago.
Yeah, I had a partner that had that mentality where, if you jacked off, then that was viewed as cheating, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
How did you navigate that with him?
um, still jacked off. Like you can't control my body. I'm not going to tell someone what they can or can't do with their own body, and you're not going to tell me what I can and can't do with my body in the privacy of my own home.
So
So
Yeah.
you were
yeah,
jacking off by yourself.
yeah, I
And
didn't
that
need
per
it.
no, I'm saying like you weren't calling somebody up on the phone and going like, "Hey, what's up? Send me
No,
Right
a
now.
I didn't need any of that.
okay.
Like back
Okay.
then, I
And
was
that was
watching
cheating?
porn, but even I didn't need porn to jack off. I don't need
Right.
porn to jack off now.
Right. Yeah,
But it
true.
was
Me
just
either.
the fact that I was ejaculating with
Without him.
him, yeah, being involved with my pleasure was
Yeah.
viewed as cheating, and that did not compute to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still did what I wanted to do. But I'm not gonna be
Hmm.
like, oh, I jacked off today, like, because to me it
So
wasn't a
you
big
would
deal.
you keep it from him because you
Yeah.
didn't want him to A, tell you that you were doing something wrong when you felt it wasn't, and B, you didn't want to disappoint him.
I didn't want the conflict because to
Mm,
me, it's like, again, it's very personal. Like, I'm not going to go at, I've never went behind any of my partners and been like, did you jack off today? Why would I do that? Because I feel
yeah.
like that's a personal thing. You're pleasuring yourself. That's what you need for that moment. It could be, it just wouldn't go down. I couldn't go to sleep. I got me a nut. I was asleep in 3 minutes. Cool.
Right.
It could be that,
Whatever
oh,
your reasoning
yeah,
is, I
whatever
think,
the
you
reason
know,
is doesn't
yeah.
really matter. It's just you did something that was personal for you. Okay, cool. Enjoy it. Was it fun? Can you send me the link? That's me. Type of, that's I'm that
I
guy.
want to see.
Yeah, I want to see it
Right.
too. Let me see if I can
Right.
get one out.
Hmm.
But again, I think that's a very common point in relationships, right? Because if you're not in alignment with what cheating is, then you will become conflicted,
Yeah,
and then you become dishonest because you're trying to avoid conflict,
yeah, yeah.
right?
I believe in
Or
body
even
autonomy.
yeah, exactly. So I think
Hmm.
that those are very interesting points to have discussion around with partners. Is like, what do you consider cheating? Like, is this something that we're gonna align on, or is this something that we're gonna disagree on?
Hmm.
Where does this leave me? Am I now gonna have to avoid telling you the truth, or do I have to cover up because I don't want you to see the lube next to my bed when you walk in? You know, it's gonna
Some of us don't need lube.
And some of us don't need lube, but exactly. So one less thing to hide,
Right,
right?
right.
Unless you shoot everywhere and then it's on the wall.
I mean, which has happened to me before, but
Right. It's
yeah,
like, well, your partner comes home and is like, what is that on
what's
the wall? And
that?
now you're
Yeah,
trying to
what is that?
You missed a
explain.
spot.
Yeah, talking about
Right.
nothing. I was drinking something and
Right. But
I
then
did a Danny
even
Thomas
that
spit
becomes
take. Yeah.
complicated when you're trying to skirt around or create some kind of excuse that makes sense.
Hmm.
All sorts of issues can come up with that. So I think it's really important to have conversations around what feels right and what feels wrong for people when it comes to cheating. Some
Cool.
people think that watching porn without your partner is cheating.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's I don't
People.
know. Yeah,
I don't know.
people. I feel like people they put they put so many like expectations on certain things that it's just like,
Right.
okay, well, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not out here with a bunch of other people. All of those things. Like, if I am being quote physically faithful to you, like,
Mhm.
and I just kind of need a moment because you're not here to get this out, what's necessarily the problem with that? But then you have some people that are like, put the porn on, why don't you have a video on, why don't you have
Mhm.
some slow jams playing when I'm over here, like, so it's
Mhm.
just it's always this balancing act of
Mhm.
trying to figure out how you need to navigate but still stay true to who you are and what you want and your own desires. um in that vein, I want to talk about performance anxiety.
Yeah.
So, how do we address issues of performance anxiety?
Yeah, that's very common, particularly when you add emotional instability, mental health challenges, and drug use.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
creates even more performance anxiety, right? So I think first of all, recognizing that you have a performance anxiety is the first thing,
Mm-hmm.
because if you avoid that kind of acknowledgement, then sometimes you can blame the other person, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you. You're too tight. You're too big.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't stimulate me enough. You didn't kiss me long enough. You
You
didn't
didn't
suck
rub
my
my
nipple.
nipples this way. Yeah,
Well,
you didn't rub
there
my
you
nipples
go.
this way. Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the first thing is to acknowledge that it's something that we're experiencing and not project that onto the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to figure out, well, where did this start? What's happening? Where is this anxiety coming from? Um, and I treat a lot of performance anxiety issues in my clinic. So that's one of sort of like the number one issue that we see. And the big thing is there is secondary performance anxiety and then there's primary performance anxiety. And the difference is with primary performance anxiety, it happens every time in every situation with every partner, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then secondary performance anxiety issues is when it happens circumstantially, right? It only happens with my main partner, but it doesn't happen with the side chicks or the side
Mm-hmm.
guys.
Mm-hmm.
It only happens when I'm getting head, but it doesn't happen when I'm fucking.
Mm-hmm.
Or it happens when I'm fucking, but it doesn't happen when I'm getting head.
Mhm.
That would be secondary. So figuring out what the issue is, how it's going on. Most I wouldn't say everyone has the same reason for performance anxiety, but some of the common factors are those factors I just mentioned, right? If there's an emotional disorder, if there's mental health issues, if there's drug use, sometimes it could be due to stress, and that would be a secondary cause. So figuring out that, and then you need treatment, right? You need help. For some people, it might be therapy. For some people, it might be exercise. For some people, it might be diet change. For some people, it's just admitting that perhaps you want something different from what you've been getting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's hard for people to admit sometimes. Sometimes you want to go 10 rounds, but really you can only do two. You might only be able to,
You might be able to
10.
get a half of
right,
one.
you might be able to
So
get half.
yeah.
So, that you have to recognize, like, I'm not that guy.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how many honey pack you take, you're just
Right.
not
Ain't
that
nobody got time to be doing
guy.
all that
Gas
nastiness.
station
Right.
pills.
Yeah, nobody got time to be doing that.
But performance anxiety is real. But it again can also be treated. So first of all, acknowledging that it exists, recognizing what the cause of it is and what type you have, and then having a diagnosable treatment plan.
Hmm.
And that's not the same as, say, the first time you're with someone sexually, or the first time they see you naked. You may kind of be in your head a little bit. Well, at least this is something that I used to do.
Yeah.
I'd be in my head a little bit thinking about, oh, I wonder what he thinks about this, or what he thinks about that, or, is my stomach too big? Does he not think my arms are big enough? Like little things like that, because the person is seeing you naked maybe for the first time. If you don't
Yeah.
share, you know, naked photos, or, you could have shared photos, things may look a little different than what they did before.
Yeah, things appear
Your phone is
larger than they
Right.
making
are. Hmm.
your best angles, and
That's
But
then
right.
yeah, that type of anxiety is not the same type of deal
Right.
here.
well, that is also performance anxiety. What you
Hmm.
just described is performance anxiety, but it's related to that specific situation. So that would be a secondary
Yeah,
performance anxiety issues, which you may resolve after that one time.
yeah,
You may be
yeah. This is like a
nervous. It
one
may
off.
take Yeah, it may take you a while to heat up. But once that meter starts going, you are good to go, and that's it. But that
Oh,
would
I thought
also
you
be
said once
performance.
that meat starts going. I
I mean,
No,
that
and
too.
then I heard meter. Okay, yeah. So I was like, wait. I was like,
meter.
yeah. I
Listen,
said once that
we can
meat
check
starts
meat
going.
around and
Okay,
insert meat.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Not that type of
Once that
meter.
meat
This is
starts to
adult.
spin on
This is
that
adults
spit,
only, so we're good.
got it.
But yeah, so that would be a performance anxiety issues, but that would be one that you may resolve yourself. Now, if that continues happening over and over again, you might need to seek treatment. Outside of what you normally do.
And that also kind of leads back to what we mentioned before. You mentioned that size matters, and so we have
Mhm.
we have big sizes and small sizes and
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 average
medium
average
sizes
sizes.
sizes.
and
Yes.
average sizes, and they all matter. All sizes matter, because some people have preferences for whatever. But we know that as society now, it's very common to see people post nude selfies and things on the Twitter,
Yeah.
on Blue Sky, and just share them in different groups and things like that. So a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm not big enough to do this or that. I shouldn't
Mm.
be showing myself or this and the other. And some people may have, oh, my dick's real big, but I have a hard time finding partners that want to accept it on the regular. So
Yeah.
those are also issues that people have to kind of overcome. So, what would you say? Would the advice for a guy that may feel like he's inadequate, or a guy that may have something that's large that he just can't get that on the regular like he wants to, is the advice that you give those types of individuals the same?
Yeah. So I think the challenges can go either way, right? You can feel it's not big enough, or you can feel it's too big. The whatever size you are, the advice I would give you is to learn how to be comfortable with it, right? It's not going anywhere. If
Hmm.
you've gone past a certain age, your dick's set,
Hmm.
right? There are some things that you can do to make it a little bit bigger, but it's not going to get any much more than an inch or in a half an inch bigger. It's
Now,
not
they
going to
do
go
have
from
something called the hem plant.
they do,
The
and
what?
It's called a hem plant.
Implant.
Hem
Him
and
plant.
plant. Oh,
Yes.
HIM plant. Okay.
HIM plant.
Got it. Okay, now what's
Yes.
that?
It's this like silicone wrap that they kind of stick in there, and it kind of like goes over the shaft. I'll send you pictures after the show.
Because I was like, I am trying to imagine this shit,
your audience
and
might want
it's
to
not.
see the pictures too, but they can go online and
Yeah,
They
yeah,
can
see
go
yeah.
how.
online.
You can go online and see
Mhm.
that. I
Yeah,
need
you can
I
go
need
online,
yeah
but the
something.
result the real results are not very good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't
Hmm.
think that all of those solutions would work for everyone. But I
Yeah,
did see the before and after photos, and I was like, oh, that's impressive. Then I was like, he didn't really need to do anything. He was fine. I don't know what this is
right.
Hmm.
about. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But even the ones who do get those implants, there have been studies that show that their erections don't aren't as potent
Mm.
as
Mm-hmm.
before. So there's all those challenges. But for people who do those implants, they're a rare occasion. But for the people who can't do those or don't want to do those, I think it's important to become comfortable with your size. So it's again learning to love yourself, right? It may be a flaw. You having a big dick may be a flaw. You having
Mm-hmm.
a small dick may be a flaw. We all have flaws, right? So let's learn to love those flaws and embrace them. Because once you begin to embrace your flaws, whether it's 13 inches or 3 inches, then we're gonna bring people into our lives that also embrace those flaws for us. If
Mm.
you are uncomfortable with it, if you find it, problematic, then you're always gonna project that in situations that you are sexually, and that's what you're gonna feel. You're gonna feel that anxiety, you're gonna feel that stress, you're gonna feel that worry. So being comfortable is the first advice I'd get. Secondly, is to find partners or find people who share the same values that you share.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, there are lots of people who like medium sized or average sized penises. There's some people who actually like small
Mm.
penises. Find that person, right? Don't go to someone when you have a 3 inch dick who wants a 10 inch dick and expect that that's going to make you feel good about yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's like you're in the wrong shop.
Mm-hmm.
That may
Barking up
not be
the
the person for
wrong
you.
tree.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's finding people who align with us and who share our values. So I think that's so important when you're going through any of those challenges, whether it's too big or too small.
Okay. All right. So my next question kind of goes back to the bait thing. In
Hmm.
a way, in a way, in a way. So, people watch a lot of porn and creating content, adult content has become very normalized. But are people's sexual experiences or what they see in content creation and porn, um, are those realistic? Like, do people really feel that they can recreate these types of things on the regular? Is that setting up people for unrealistic expectations when it comes to them just having regular vanilla sex?
Yeah. It's absolutely unrealistic expectations. Unfortunately, we don't see it that way because what we're sort of like encouraged to do is to see something, do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I saw
Yeah.
so and so doing it. I want
I'm
to
gonna
try to.
emulate that. Mm-hmm.
Right. And that goes, across the board, not just in terms of porn and content create and adult content creation, but it is absolutely unrealistic expectations. If you talk to the people who create this content, whether they're doing it professionally or amateur, they will tell you this is not normal. This is not how I usually have sex,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
This is made for your entertainment. So everything's exaggerated. They may
Mm-hmm.
be on 10 to 10 different drugs just to
Hmm.
keep their penis hard or to be able to act like they're enjoying a 13-inch penis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because,
You know,
baby, when I tell
right,
you some of those content creators, I'm like, you get paid and you don't even look like you're enjoying this, but
right,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
and
I
and
hope your sex is
sometimes
like this
that
all the
that
time.
may be the lane that they're in. They may be creating content that looks painful, so they have to pretend that they're in that space. It's acting. At the end of the day, I
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
tell people all the time, everything you see on a porn site, everything you see on these OnlyFans, they're acting. Some of them are better actors than others, but it's all made for
Yes.
your
Yes.
entertainment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't then recreate. When I don't know if anyone ever saw Jackass, and it says on there,
Yeah.
"Do not
Yeah.
try this at
Hmm.
home."
Mm-hmm. Right.
I
Right.
The
think all the
disclaimer.
porn content should have that on it. it,
Mm-hmm.
should, it should
But you
have
can't.
that
But you
warning
can't tell. Yeah,
sign.
you can't tell them that because I guess people have these parasocial relationships with,
Mhm.
with people that they see on TV and in content creation, and especially if you have the opportunity to engage with that person on social media or through
Yeah.
that OnlyFans or that Just for Fans or whatever that content creation site is, you have that opportunity to engage with them. And so they feel connected to them, like, oh, these are real people.
Yeah.
So these are real people. They're just doing things on camera. So
Mhm.
yeah, this exists in reality. It's
Yeah,
not
they're
a
thinking it's
cartoon.
real. They're just recording it, right?
Right,
And not
right. Yeah,
recognizing that there's a storyline or a plot or
exactly.
a setup that goes into that. But I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you a little bit something that's interesting. I've worked with a lot of people who are content creators or, award-winning porn stars, right? And one of the challenges, there are many, but one of the challenges they have and why they come to therapy is trying to get their partners in real life to
Mm-hmm.
see them other than the characters they play,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
to the point that you mentioned, Darius, is when someone meets these people in real life and they're like, oh, they're real. They're just like my next door neighbor or my brother
Mm-hmm.
or whoever. Those partners then expect the same thing that they see them do and want
Mm-hmm.
it recreated in real life. And they can't even recreate it in real life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's this conflict that they have with partners where they can't seem to meet partners who accept that their persona on porn is not the persona that they're going to get at home.
Mm-hmm.
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 And
Mm-hmm.
that's a big challenge. So
Yeah.
I think if when we think about recreating these sets or recreating these images or these videos, be mindful that it's a creation that they've made just for TV or just for your OnlyFans entertainment, and they can't even recreate it.
And
Mm-hmm.
they're incentivized because they want money.
Of
So
course.
because so you
Mm-hmm.
see all the promo, just like we have promo for our podcast online, and people put promo for their OnlyFans online. It's all to get people to get those subscriptions and
Yeah.
keep those subscriptions maintained so that you can get that bill paid the next month and the next month after that. So
And,
Mm-hmm.
and and sometimes they see these, particularly on OnlyFans, they see people putting these videos out, not realizing that those videos are probably months in between.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they may take a 13-inch dick, but then it takes them 2 weeks to recover from it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to take a 13-inch dick when you're out at
Yeah,
the
you went
party,
to the
thinking
to
you
the
can go to work the
club,
next day,
as
and it's
Jeff calls
like
it. Yeah, right.
it's just not going to work the same way.
Right.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, I do think that that's something that I really think we should be having more conversations about. It's what's real, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and debunking some of those myths that you can just you can create porn every day when you're at home.
All right.
Yeah. And I've
Create your
heard of a
own
lot
porn.
of, yeah, right. Create your own porn. I've seen a lot of content creators to do interviews, and there are a couple that have stood out to me.
Mm,
And, a couple of them have said that, look, yeah, I don't expect to be doing this like too much longer. I'm doing this, just to kind of take care of a few things, or
right.
or I did it to take care of a few things, but I don't particularly enjoy doing this. People seeing them only, like you said, as the characters they play, and not seeing them as anything more than that, and not being able to have normal, quote, normal kind of engagements and interactions
Mhm.
with people, because they're expecting them to perform in the ways that they performed online is wild. And they're like, yeah, this it's not easy. It's not fun all the time, but so I definitely understand that and get that.
And I think it's also important to remind people that we all act differently when we're getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We do.
Yeah.
We
Doesn't
do.
matter what you're getting paid to do,
Mm-hmm.
we all act differently. So this for them, it's a job,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're expecting them to do the same job when they're not getting paid with you. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
You wouldn't do the same things if you're not at work getting paid. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also an important point.
I know that in the realm of porn, there's some conversations and stuff about sex parties, people trying to recreate those things, sex clubs,
Mm.
and also something that increased kind of post COVID, especially when we were able to, quote, be outside. Um, but and bathhouses and cruising spaces and stuff like that. So how do you feel about how that impacts hookup culture?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think, kind of outdoor, public engagement sexually is making a big comeback. It
Mm-hmm.
was real big in the 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Before HIV took that down and tumbled it, but it's making a big comeback. Particularly now with things like DoxyPep and
Mm-hmm.
DoxyPrep
Mm-hmm.
and antiretrovirals and all that, all of the medication. So I think it's definitely impacted hookup culture a lot more because now the apps are great, but you can go to a club, you can go to a circuit party,
Mm.
and and never have to exchange numbers with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's almost like instant gratification, right? With a hookup, with when you're using a sex app, you kind of have to go through the roundabout. Are you coming over to me? Am I coming to you? What time you
Who's
getting
hosting?
here?
Right.
It can take some time and it can be exhausting. Now, when you're going out to a sex party, it's instant. You're
Mm-hmm.
literally walking naked. You nut a few times. You're ready to go home, and that's it. You leave it on the floor. You go
Or the wall.
on the wall,
Or somebody.
Or
or
somebody.
somebody,
Yes,
yeah, or the bunk
absolutely.
bed that was
Or
in
the
the
bunk
middle of the
bed or the
room.
chair or yeah.
So I think it definitely has given us more access to enjoying sex in ways that we perhaps didn't have 10 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the resurgence of it is creating, for a lot of people, compulsivities, right?
Okay.
So we get back to this point where people who don't recognize that they have underlying, issues, it may be an addiction, it may be something that is triggering for them from their childhood, it may be trauma, it may be abuse, all of those things. And then they're in this space where they're excited and they're stimulated and it triggers a compulsivity. Now they want more. Now it's sex. It's not just sex with random people. It's sex and drugs with random people. And then it's not just sex and drug with random people. It's sex and drug with random groups.
Mm.
So it creates this compulsion that sometimes can become out of control. And I think we probably all experience one, maybe at least one person in our circle who we may think maybe they have a problem now. Maybe this is not no longer just for recreation, right? I see people like that all the time at work.
Wow.
So I know it exists, and I know they have friends. Because they tell me about the things that they do with their friends. I'm like, does your friend recognize that this is happening? And they're like, yeah, someone said so and so, and oh, he doesn't know, or he's doing the same thing. So I think yes, it impacts hookup culture. Yes, it creates more space for us to enjoy ourselves sexually, and it also creates pathways for compulsivities to exist.
All right. Awesome.
Real talk.
Leave it on the
Absolutely
floor.
real talk. Yeah, leaving it on the floor, the wall.
Oh, you like that, Jeff, didn't
Yeah,
Mm,
that was
that was
good.
clever. That was
He's very
clever.
clever.
Yes.
Very clever. Very clever.
you?
All right. So how do you, as a therapist, approach the discussion of emotional connection with people in their sexual relationships? Is it important to have an emotional connection with someone that you're having sex with?
That's a very, very important question. And the answer is for some people it is, and for others it's not. Some people actually avoid emotional connections because it's too painful,
Mm-hmm.
it's too challenging. They don't know how to navigate emotion, so they want to just separate that. They still want to have pleasure,
Hmm.
they still want to have fun, they still want to be idolized, or they still want to be complimented, they still want to be validated, just without the emotional connection. So there's that group of people. It's not important to them. And then there's another group of people where emotional connection is important to them. And they're on this search for emotional connection. They're having sex, but what they really want is emotional connection. But because they're not getting that, they keep going to the other person. And it's a revolving door. It's like, yes. And sometimes with those people for who emotional connection is important, sometimes that emotional connection can be quite misguided. it can turn into abuse. They're so engaged with someone emotionally that they ignore the abuse that comes with it, and that's where they become emotionally abused, or they become an emotional abuser.
Mm.
So in any of those situations, I think emotional connection, whether you want it or not, it's important to have that discussion, right? If you don't want an emotional connection, why not? Why is it so difficult? Why is it painful for you? How are you handling that trauma? And if you do want one, then what does that mean for you having an emotional connection? I always with my clients, I always get them to think about what their ideal situation would be. Is it a monogamous relationship? Is it a non-monogamous relationship? How much emotion are you investing in this? How much emotions do you want? What does emotion look like to you? It's not just about love languages, which is a very hot button, very microwavable term that people use all the time.
We had a
I,
discussion about
We
that.
had we had a whole
yeah,
podcast about that. Sure did.
yeah, it's very like poppy, right? And it's like, tell me what your love language is, but emotions go way beyond that. Emotions aren't just about love. It's about expressing. How do you deal with anger? Where does your anger come from? How do you deal with sadness? How do you deal with grief? What gets you frustrated? What makes you feel loved? What makes you feel what's personal to you? For you, Jeff, that's about jerking off by yourself sometimes and not having your partner. And that is one way you show yourself love, right? But if you showing
Hmm.
yourself love impacts how the other person sees you and the relationship, then that's going to be emotionally challenging. So all of that is things that we have to talk about in terms of emotional connection. And seeking an emotional connection can be quite damaging for someone if you're falling in love with someone who doesn't have the capacity to reciprocate that.
Okay.
Nice and clear. It's
Yeah.
exactly what it should be. What resources or practices do you recommend to help gay men build and maintain a healthy sexual identity over time?
Oh, I think that's so important talking about sexual identity. So many gay men just don't have a healthy relationship with sex. I've seen that firsthand, not just at work, but in social settings. So I think the biggest thing is to know who you are, right?
Okay.
Not even accepting who you are, because that's challenging for us as Black gay men. We've been told growing up that who you are is an abomination. It's not going to be accepted by society.
Hmm.
It's not the best way to be. You should do better. All of that, that's embedded in us, right?
Hmm.
So accepting who we are is another challenge. But just knowing who we are, knowing that we are Black, we're gay, we're all these different things, or queer, however you want to describe, and then getting to a point where you can begin to accept that is
Hmm.
important. He
Hmm.
talks about penis sizes, for example. Does size matter?
Hmm.
It matters, yes. Whatever size it is, you have to accept it. That's part of who you are. So, building a strong relationship, a strong foundation with your own identity is really important before you bring someone else into it. And there's a website I think that has really great resources. It's called itgetsbetter.org.
Hmm.
It has a long list of resources that gay men in general, but particularly Black gay men, can access to. And I always say as well, not only because I'm a therapist, but I think therapy is definitely helpful for us.
Hmm. Hmm.
I would love for every Black gay man to have access to good, healthy therapy,
Hmm.
right? I think that would just changes how we see ourselves and how we show up in the world and how we show up with our partners. So
Hmm.
those are the things I would say are really important. Accepting who you are, all of who you are, not hiding it. Um, and then building a strong relationship with your identity
Hmm.
and a strong relationship with sex.
Yeah, yeah.
Healthy relationship with sex.
Healthy
Yeah,
relationship with sex.
absolutely. 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 A strong, healthy relationship with sex is what I would say. And then also on my website, there's resources. I'm not sure if you're going to put my website
Oh
up.
yeah.
Yes, we will. Hmm.
There'll be lots of resources there that is specifically tailored for us.
And
or us
that's
by us.
okay, not FUBU. So yeah, so I was
No.
actually that was going to be the next thing that I was going to ask you, like, where can people find you? And
Yeah, so
yeah,
I'm on Instagram, relationship and sex doc, and that's relationship and sex doc.
yeah, I was like, I want to see this spelling that you're getting
You're
ready to
right.
do
You want to
real
see
quick.
the
Yeah,
spelling?
I want to, can't wait to
It's
hear
easy.
that.
Well,
It's on the screen right now. Look,
right.
look
Okay,
down,
right,
look down
We'll
below.
put it on the
Uh,
screen and have it in the
and
show
then my
notes for the
web,
listeners.
right.
right, and then my website is sextherapyforyou.com. And even though I specialize in sex and relationship, I have a holistic therapy practice. So I treat people with anxiety, other health concerns, other mental health issues as well. So,
Okay.
but I think sex and relationships are important because so many of us have challenges with sex and relationship, and there's not too many places we can go with that. So I wanted to have a space that was specifically dealing with that, but not exclusively.
Okay. Good.
Do you take all insurances?
No insurance.
Got to pay
No
out of
insurance.
pocket.
It's all out of pocket. But I will. I have a special place for us. So I'll always try to. There's some discounts that are available for people who are unable to pay full price. So
Okay, that's
Awesome.
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited. I love talking to you guys. It was great.
Well, we're glad that you love talking to us. We definitely will have to have you
Yes.
back and
Oh,
have some
anytime.
more conversations. Now you
Hmm.
say anytime, all right. So when I reach out,
Well, it's open for you anytime. We just had to fit that in my schedule. You
oh,
saw us
okay,
running from one session to get in here on
okay, all
time.
right.
So, but we did it. We made it,
We
and
made it. We did.
yeah, we
Yeah,
did. We
yeah.
made it, and
So
such important conversation that we've had.
yeah,
Indeed.
absolutely,
So I'm
absolutely.
really excited about that, and
Summer.
congrats on you guys having this amazing platform.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
Yes.
again,
Thanks.
thank you for being here. Thank you for again uh wanting to be here, and sharing all of what you have and all of your experience and your wisdom and all of that with us because it's invaluable.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Thank you guys.
Of
You're
course.
welcome.
You're welcome.
Take care.
All right. All right. So,
Well, don't
family,
leave just
that's a
yet.
wrap for this episode of Just Draws. We hope you felt the love, laughed a little, and maybe even learned something today.
So remember, the conversation does not stop here. So
Mm-mm.
follow us individually on social media and let us know your thoughts, share your stories, or just say what you on.
Until then, just be bold, just be beautiful, and most importantly, just be.
We'll catch y'all next time.
Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Now be sure to like, share, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and Spotify at Just Drawz. That's JustDrawz. Until next time,